So Aeva, you mentioned XC. I expect there may be people watching or listening that don't know the story. And since it happened just recently, would you mind kind of walking through what the XC issue is and how it came about and what it affected, what the impact could have been, and kind of how it was found throughout the community?
I can give a quick summary. There's been a lot of reporting on it in Politico and Wired. A lot of the tech community has been writing up their own analyses. My off-the-cuff and inaccurate summary, I'm sure, is roughly that it seems from publicly available information, an online persona, all of us use online personas, right? You set up a Twitter account or an email handle, that's a persona, you pick a name. So nothing unusual there. This online persona made some contributions to open source projects, fixed some bugs, triaged some issues, chatted on IRC, looked just like a normal person showing up to do good work, chop wood, carry water, as they say. Nothing suspicious for years. And eventually, one of the maintainers of this system library, XZ, it's a compression utility that's used at a pretty low layer in a lot of POSIX operating systems, particularly Linux. This persona was granted maintainer rights on this little project, and because they were showing up and doing good work. And then a little while after that, they added some very cleverly obfuscated code that doesn't look alarming by itself, but some other developer in a different project noticed one day his test suite running off the latest, development branch of some Linux distro ran a little slower. And he was like, that's weird. I benchmark my tests super carefully. I don't know, something like that. And he went to investigate why his tests ran slower. We should all be really grateful that he chose to do that, because he found this before it had reached any of the major releases of Linux. And folks identified it, talked about it, rolled it back. A lot of press activity now around how we're preventing this backdoor from actually rolling out to the world. I say we, by we I mean the open source community, not me personally. So yeah, I guess that's a quick summary.
I might augment with a couple of pieces, just in the sense that there looked to be some relatively significant social engineering that was happening on the maintainer. And from the various mail threads, there was, again, a lot of angst was portrayed in the community for lack of engagement by this maintainer, and this person is busy, and actually commented that they were also having some mental health issues. It's a pretty sad back and forth in that mail thread, but definitely social engineering. I'd also call out that it wasn't actually in the code, like in GitHub. It was actually in a build script, and that's the really sneaky stuff, right? This is really, really sophisticated, sneaky stuff that they were doing. And they had test files that had the actual binaries that carried the malware payload that were then actually pulled in from this build script and augmented. And the target was SSHD, right? That's the other big key, was the fact that it was really targeting, it looks like AMD 64 systems running SSHD, which is how things get securely sent and managed over the internet. So it's a really, really huge backdoor. And as you said, it was the luck of somebody working on Postgres who happened to notice ultimately that, because things were slower, he tracked it down to this library. And as we had talked about a little bit earlier, the fact that this developer had access to logs and everything else, because it was all open source, and many other people in the community could also help triage this because it is all open. It was found quickly, and it didn't make it into a major distro. I guess the sophistication of this, it's kind of like anything in the sense that the more popular and the more recognized as popular something is, that's where attackers look to exploit more. for the longest time, Windows had orders of magnitude, more vulnerabilities than Mac or Linux. And it was mostly because there were just that many more Windows boxes out there, and it was obviously the better target. Things have kind of evened out from a distribution standpoint, but we keep talking about the open source ecosystem, and lots of organizations talk about how, again, 80% plus of the lines of code in a given piece of software is open source. And that's a pretty big target, and it looks as though the sophistication of these attacks and the number are way up.
I mean, I think it's not surprising, just in general, open source or not, like we are all living our lives in a digital environment in the modern world. So it kind of seems like that we arrived into an era where it's not your physical self that will get attacked, it's your digital self that will get attacked in a way. So I think the kind of the power of open source shows in this example that that people have the chance to find these and see these, because if this was a proprietary piece, then maybe the backdoor would have never made it in there in the first place, or maybe we would hear about it a few years down the road when some really serious damage was made. But at the same time, the more eyes, the better. People being able to test, to run their benchmarks on the software. I think it should naturally increase the chances of someone finding similar backdoors in the future if they get introduced again. And just how much work it is to get it in the first place. Like it's a lot of effort when it comes to open source and that open environment where you have to contribute, build trust. If you're a one-person maintainer, then your project must be really good for a while if it gets wide adoption. So it's not really easy either, I think, to break into these systems.